Valley and
Okay.
picked up
yeah.
land, homesteaded? Was there still homesteading?
Yeah, there was. He became a farmer, and they were, I guess, happy there. Ethel and Joseph were in the same ward. I think they ultimately had two wards there, but they got acquainted.
This is Joseph
Humphrys.
Humpherys, right?
And they got married in 1897, so he would have been about 23, and she'd probably be about maybe 18.
Your grandparents.
Yeah.
Do you remember them?
I remember her, but I don't remember. He died 6 months after I was born.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you remember him?
Oh yeah, I remember it real well. I remember. I remember one day we were living all in this same house at that time, and so I went over to the north there not just a kid, and he went over to fix fence, and got the fence fixed and everything. There was a little strand of wire about like that he told me to take and keep, and so I walked a little ways and I threw it away. and we got back over to the house and he asked me where it was. And I told him that he made me go back and pick that wire and bring it back,
You weren't thinking kindly of him at the time?
No.
What did he need it for?
Well, they probably wound it into another piece of fence wire.
In his case, it was just a lesson, because he didn't really have a use for it.
Oh, okay.
I told you to keep it, you better keep it.
Yeah.
So he was a stern man, I guess, or
Oh yeah, he was a.
and it must have been interesting for him having these young kids around the house that they might not have been used to.
It was a change then. And of course he had asthma right along, he was afflicted with that and had been for a long time. And so, this played on his behavioral too. But he was a good man.
Was it his wife that moved to Logan?
Yeah, after his death.
And LaFawn lived with him in school?
Right.
Anyway.
LaFawn and the head of the girl.
Their first child was a girl. Her name was Lillian. And then Dad was born a couple of years later in 1900. And just a couple of months after Dad was born, they, I was going to say immigrated, but they moved to Star Valley to find some ground to farm. And that's a little bit late to find any really good ground in Star Valley because it had all been taken.
You're looking at what year, about what year was it?
1900. They lived in Afton at first. Then they found the property in Thane and moved down there. They, I guess, just he talks about moving an old blacksmith shop from Afton to the farm, to the homestead, and that's what they lived in.
Oh, they actually moved it, huh?
As I recall, that's what he said.
They dismantled it? And
I guess, yeah.
reconstructed it?
Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
And it probably had a sod roof, so, you wouldn't take that.
Yeah.
And just dismantle what you could and go. And then, that same year that they moved, Lillian died. I'm trying to think where she's buried. That's interesting. I don't know. She may be buried in the same cemetery. I don't remember. Anyway.
Yeah, but as a matter of fact, it'd have to be, wouldn't it, if she died up there in Thane?
Well, I'm not sure they'd moved to Thane by that time. She may have died while they were living in Afton. That's why I was wondering.
But they had to sell the house in Thane, didn't they?
But they didn't do that immediately upon getting to Afton. They stayed and worked there.
Oh,
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, so they I guess Joseph was fairly successful in getting something to grow on the farmland. He had.
Was it a homestead? Did you say that they were able to get?
Yeah, it was a homestead. Yeah.
You know, and I'm responsible for this problem, but you know, we found the original homestead document signed by Theodore Roosevelt on that property, that 160 acres.
Really?
Yeah. Now ask me where it is.
Hey, I didn't lose it.
Poor Brad, I pick on him so much.
Well.
So who was it that died? Did you say Lillian, the oldest?
Yeah, Lillian was the oldest.
And she was just 2 years old.
Yeah.
And then Harold's the next. Joe, okay, that was.
Then Vi and I won't get them in order. Vi and
Willard.
And
Willard died young. Now, what was that all about?
Willard died by being thrown off a horse, and apparently his head hit a rock.
He was 46.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right after they moved from Live Hot Springs over to Grays Lake. That happened. Yeah.
I don't have any real memory of it.
He was married and had a family, I
Oh,
suppose.
yeah.
Oh yeah, he had a large family.
That did.
Yeah. In fact, I think he got married before Dad got married.
Yeah, I think
He was about 4 years younger, but he didn't go on a mission. And so he had a large family.
And then there was Joseph, who was, I
Who
think, died
young.
very young.
Yeah.
And then Arvilla,
Yeah.
James Donald.
That's Don.
That's Don.
Yeah.
Raymond is next.
And then Twyla and Lola.
Twyla and Lola.
was it?
I guess we just asked the wrong person.
So then, did Grandpa take over the homestead from?
He bought the farm from Ethel. And in fact, I've seen, where did I see these? Oh, they're in some of the stuff that I think Alan has. It's a little receipt book of Dad paid her, what was it? I don't know how much money it was.
What are we talking about?
For the farm.
For the farm. Dad,
Did he pay for it?
yeah, he paid her in, I don't know, monthly or yearly payment.
$26,000.
That's what he bought the farm for.
How many acres was that?
160.
One section.
Yeah, but he added the GA40 to that. So there was a little over, and then the flat, so it was around 240 acres at that time.
So how old were you guys when he bought that?
Oh, that was right after we moved to, right before.
I was born.
It was after we moved, right after we moved.
So just after Grandpa died,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
And
she
that-
sold the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a copy of that.
Humphrys is spelled wrong, and someone said that
So
is
what's
not
new?
his signature. Yeah.
Oh,
That's-
yeah, that's, I'm
That
sure
may-
that's not.
By
That may
M.W.
be a-
Young.
that
Yeah,
may
there
be
you
a
go.
Machine signature, huh?
Yeah, M.W. Young, Secretary, Recorder of the General Land Office, wherever that was.
So it
Where's-
isn't Theodore Roosevelt's signature.
Let me see
It's the
that.
secretary.
Is that by?
And
That's not,
at Evanston, Wyoming, by the president, by
Okay.
yeah. there would be right there.
M.W.
By, I can
Young,
see that.
Secretary,
Right, her home
Yeah.
address.
and whatever
So,
that
so
is.
he apparently had a stamp that he used.
Oh, so you have the keys.
It,
And then Grandpa
it
bring 'em
might
home.
be, although you don't see it. It looks like it's actually ink.
Yeah, it does. It really
And
looks.
so maybe
ori-
he just,
It really looks original. It really
Yeah.
does.
yeah.
Terry, I don't mind writing you.
So, we like to think it's President Roosevelt. I brought my scanner, by the way, so we can, any of these things we can scan. We'll figure out a way.
Yeah, probably have to do it at a larger,
I put that
So,
and I-
anyway.
your father then goes ahead and farms, buys and farms the land and grows what? What does he grow, alfalfa?
Alfalfa and wheat and
Yeah.
barley.
Yeah,
Barley,
Yeah.
supplementing that with timber work in the
the timber
certain
work,
times of year.
the timber work didn't start until after the end of World War II.
Right.
So he had from 39 through the war years. I guess he would plant the crop, but then Dad went to Tooele to work at the Tooele Ordnance Depot, and was there.
Was that post World War II?
No, that was during the war.
During the war?
During the war,
When they
so-
were building that up?
Yeah, so he had the farm and then he went there to work too. I'm not sure how he divided that up. As near as I can tell from Dad, what Dad wrote, he worked full-time at the Ordnance Depot for a while. Whatever a while is, I'm not sure, but it was.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just remember that being one winter, wasn't it?
Was it just one winter? I don't know.
I don't remember. for
I
sure.
have no memory of it,
But
just from reading Dad's book.
I remember that he left from Afton to go to Montpelier to go over there, and I remember he caught the school bus to get up to Afton. And we caught it down on the highway, and he had to get up there by the school bus. And I remember that was during the winter time when that happened. It was early winter. And did you hear how he got on as a truck driver?
Yeah. He could back a truck up better than anybody at the depot.
How it was is that there was a guy there that was apparently didn't know much about it, and he tried to back the truck up to unload at the dock, and he just making a mess of it. He couldn't back it up, and Dad could see that he was having a problem doing that, and so Dad come in and jumped in the truck and backed it up there, without a hitch, and the job was his after that.
That was at the depot?
That was at the depot.
At the depot.
Yeah. So he got upgraded fairly soon to a truck driver after he got back there. He went back there just an ordinary laborman.
It couldn't have been easy to leave his family and Alan, how old were you in that year? We're talking.
Well, I was probably, 40, during the war.
45.
that about 45, so I'd been about 16, I guess, 15, 16.
Alan's 2 years older than, no, it's Alan and LaFawn.
Well,
then you're-
Alan was 3 years older, and the phone was 2 years older than me. And so yeah, I'd probably been a sophomore then.
You guys, your home was there on the homestead, right?
Right. Yeah.
So why wasn't he drafted, or was he?
Oh yeah, he
Oh, he
was.
was.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he served in the Navy. He saw Japan.
Did he?
Actually, he was on the verge of being drafted, so he volunteered for the Navy, and he went in as a radio man, and that required some, quite a bit of math and that sort of thing. So he went down, was tutored by Mom's brother-in-law down in Salt Lake, the engineer down there that
Oh, Wendelbo?
Wendelbo.
Lee Wendelbo.
Lee
Really?
Wendelbo, yeah. He went down for, I don't know how long it was, a week or 2 weeks or something like that, and he just jammed him full of the stuff they needed to know. So he went back and he took the test and he passed them, and they were fairly rigorous tests for it. So,
So where was he stationed?
He went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Michigan for early training. In fact, it turns out he was there at the same time Denton was. They didn't know it, never met each other, no, obviously, but they were there at the same time. And then he got assigned on a ship. How'd that happen? Anyway, against his desires, they found out that he could type, and they were in sore need of somebody to do that. So he got put into some position where he did a lot of office work.
Mostly
He had
stayed
started
there in the
out-
Great Lakes area?
No, this was.
he went over to Japan.
He went to
Yeah,
Japan.
Yeah, after he got finished his basics, I think they put him on a ship and sent him off.
Right.
And at first, or was it later? I don't remember. Sometime during his couple of years in the military, he was the equivalent of the mission car man. He took care of the vehicles, and he was astounded to find that half the guys that had the job previously couldn't change oil.
This was the carpool.
Yeah.
Was he married at the time, or did he get married
No.
after he got
No.
home?
After he got home.
Well, I bet the family just waited every week for a letter, and they was a kind of.
Oh, Mother kept, I have no idea where they ever went, but she kept all the letters she got. And she had there was a little furniture, a little not a nightstand, but a little stand right by the stuffed chair that everybody wanted to sit in when they came in the house. That was the place to get and sit. And right next to it, in a little drawer, she's
Had all
shoved
his
in
letters.
all these letters. Yeah, I have no idea what happened to them.
I don't recall that. That's interesting, yeah.
So he wasn't ever really in harm's way too much. Stationed over there, sort of.
No.
As a matter of fact, I think he went in and got his basic training, and then the war ended right after that, so that.
Oh yeah, he couldn't get. He wanted that radio training that he'd kind of qualified for, but then they said, "Hey, the war's ending, so we don't need you for that." So they just put him in whatever job came along. But he got. He made, I think, two trips to Japan.
On the boat.
On a boat, yeah. I'm not sure they were the same boat, but He got there twice.
That was the first of many of his travels, because I've seen
Yeah.
slides of him in Egypt, and
Yeah.
he really traveled the world.
Well, yeah, he did. He had that job at the Agricultural Research Center in Twin Falls, and they developed irrigation procedures for arid countries. So where are the arid countries of the world? That's where he went. I remember we took care of a couple of their kids when he went to Mexico, I think, or somewhere down in Central America. I think it was Mexico City that he had to go to, and I think they had Shirley and Diane at the time, and I think he was desperate. He just called us up and says, "Can you take care of the kids for, I don't know what it was, a week?" I don't remember much about it, but that's why we were living in Sunnyvale, probably Sunnyvale.
So, when did they pretty much give up on the farm and move?
Well, they didn't leave the farm totally until they sold it to Jerry, which was, well, I'm guessing they. When did we buy a house in Sunnyvale? Would have been about 1966. And it would have been within a year of that, because Dad sold the whole ranch to Jerry, plus the buildings, basically everything, for about the same amount of money as we paid for our little 1,000 square foot little cottage in Sunnyvale on postage stamp lot.
Do you remember how much they sold the farm for?
Yeah, Dee's right. It was just about exactly. They'd been making the equivalent of interest payments on that federal loan that they had when they purchased it, and so they sold it to Jerry for the principal on that thing.
Pretty much was still
We paid $27,000
for the house.
for our house. Yeah.
And that's about what they still owed the bank on the
Yeah.
land.
Yeah, that's very close to the
Yeah,
same.
that is very close to that $27,000.
With that many acres, it's hard to really be economically feasible.
Well,
the shorter
really
growing
really
seasons.
never was. During the war, they had some pretty good prices. They had support prices and whatnot, which Grandpa didn't like at all.
But he took advantage of.
Actually, I don't think he
I'm
had a
not
lot
s-
of choice.
Yeah, you either did or didn't.
Yeah.
It was a pretty rigid system. Constitution.
I can see where that would go against his grain.
Oh yeah, that. Yeah.
So they got by working timber in the times.
And phosphate
Yeah.
delivery
phos-
during the winter
Yeah.
Okay.
and fall,
And what?
and during the fall.
Oh, yeah.
There was one year. That the paperwork was a nightmare, and Dad had it planned out to be able to deliver phosphate to a whole group of farmers in the valley, and he also made a huge one of these whirly-bird little hand fertilizer spreaders. Well, visualize a giant-sized version of that, where you take the rear end of a car and tip it up and run a drive shaft up and hook it onto a big
spreader. Anyway, that we basically contracted with the farmer, in addition to supplying the fertilizer, to spread the stuff. And anyway, the government, out of the clear blue, said, well, this year the whole program's ending October 31st. And Dad could see probably 3/4 of the money that he was planning to make. By this time, I was a junior in high school. Harold was a senior. Yeah, so anyway, that would have been about 1954. So you were at BYU in 54?
Probably in BYU.
You got married, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's about the time you got married. Anyway, there was that thing hanging over Dad's head about how to support the kids in school. And anyway, so here's what the plan came to be. Dad arranged with all the farmers to accelerate their delivery schedule. And we only had about 2 weeks to do this. So come Monday morning, I think Harold drove the truck with Dad to Pocatello, got a load of phosphate on the truck, and then Dad drove the loaded truck back. And then I went to school, and then right after school, I met them at the farmer's field with the big whirlybird that we hooked on the back of the truck. And then the two of us got in the back and shoveled the phosphate out into that voracious thrower while Dad drove around the field.
OSHA never would have approved that.
No,
today.
this was not OSHA. And then we'd all go back home that night. Then the next day, we would just switch. Harold and I would just switch jobs. I would drive down to Pocatello, and I remember this happened every morning. We had to get up about 3 o'clock in the morning. And we'd all, yesterday we didn't get home till dark from all that work, and we get down to that stretch of Antelope Flats where the river is in a canyon, kind of right off the edge of the road.
Or the old bridge washed out, Snake River.
I don't remember. Anyway, it was down along there, and I just got unbearably sleepy. It was a fight. But fortunately, what kept me going was the fact that there was no power steering. This big old Jimmy had a steering wheel that seemed like it was about this big around. At least that's what I remember.
So you're wrestling that the whole way.
So I had to be wrestling that. So that kept me awake. But it was a struggle. But by the time we got to Idaho Falls, I was wide awake and ready to go. It happened every day I drove. But we did that every day for 2 weeks, and that got a big hunk of the delivery done.
Yeah, it was a real blessing for the family to be able to get that kind of money
Yeah.
before they closed the program.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know the details of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was an inventive person. He was
Very much
the
so.
log peeler that I
Yeah.
heard about, and this thing.
Yeah, that was I think kind of a crowning thing, but just the idea of taking a manure loader, a hydraulic loader, and mounting it on that old stripped down Army troop carrier was I still think of that kind of marvel. Yeah.
Hmm.
Going back to the farm, I never realized until I went back years later and just visited there and said, I don't ever remember all these rocks. I mean, the whole farm was a rock pile, but I never remembered that as a kid. I remember going out and irrigating. Another of Dad's methods. Oh, you probably never even knew about the big
Cleat track.
the cleat track and the giant rainbird.
Yeah.
You've never seen a rainbird like Dad got. We hung it on the back of this old it was a huge tractor that they used to pull airplanes out onto the runway with. And Dad got it for essentially nothing because it was Army surplus and they were just trying to get rid of it. And he got a huge compressor pump and mounted it on the back of this thing on a little platform, and then he got this rainbird, and the rainbird had a nozzle opening that was about that big, and the whole rainbird was about that long. And that thing was like a fire hose shooting out over the ground, and it really, really worked, except for one. I guess it turned out to be an almost fatal flaw. And that is that thing sucked so much mud and rock up into the pipe. It had a big pipe that big around that was the intake pipe that dropped down into the irrigation ditch. Well, it would just widen the ditch basically.
Sucking up all the silt.
Yeah,
rock
sucking
and
everything up, and so that would get stuck in the pump. And anyway, I guess that I don't remember that we ever used that thing more than about a year. Do you remember?
It wasn't too long, but I can still picture it out there. And that thing shot out there for I don't know how many years. Just way out there. And it took, to give you an idea, it took the whole ditch to run the thing. There was not anything left over to go down that.
Sucked all that water in, huh?
They puddled it right at the end, put a dam in the ditch, and put the whatever down in it. That sucked that thing, used everything of it.
So that was his early irrigation invention.
And that was quite a spectacle. People would come down the road and watch that thing out there throwing water on.
Throwing water and rocks.
From one end of the field to the other, you know. Yeah. I remember that.
But
What was the other thing that you said they invented or worked out?
well, the log figure. Oh, this they called it a farmhand, and it was basically a hydraulic loader. And it had a scoop kind of thing on it, and its general use was as a loader for lifting manure or other loads onto a truck or whatever. But Dad got the idea of using that to load these mine props onto the truck. Now, the traditional way was to make a ramp up the side of the truck bed and roll each one of those logs up. That was at least a half a day's job for about 3 or 4 people to load a truck. Because by the time by the time you get it up very high, you know, you're really rolling that puppy up a heavy ramp.
And then of course, the debarker, the peeler.
Yeah, I think that was the crown jewel. But we could load a truck in, what, 30 minutes? I can't remember.
With the lift.
It wasn't very
With
long.
that lift, yeah.
Yeah, that was.
DeVerl generally ran the lift, and yeah, he got really good at that. But the log peeler was.
How did that work?
Well, what you have to visualize doing is putting two types of motion on the log that you're going to run under a peeling blade.
So the peeling blade's stationary. You're moving the log around.
The peeling blade was a rotary drum with a couple of sharp blades on it, and it could move up and down because the logs wouldn't turn uniformly. But you had to rotate the log and drive it forward. So you got those two motions. So you get this helical cutting motion on the log.
And that was made from a green hammering machine, a green cracking. It had a big cylinder in there about this big around with some blades in it and or hammers in it. And that would crack the green, took the hammers off, put some blades across the width of it, and that thing just rode up and down on the old log.
And Dad would had it counterbalanced so that it could move up and down readily, but he would grab the handle and kind of guide it up and down because some of the trees were really crooked, and so the thing was just going up and down like this. And to pull to give it the forward and back motion, we just hooked the old DeSoto car onto the carriage. Tied it on the front. It's like just taking a trailer and tying it onto the front of your car and then driving backwards under the log peelers, the way it worked.
That was going back and forth, and then we had the old John Deere tractor with a big belt about that wide that powered the hammer or the rotating cylinder.
Yeah, any pictures ever taken of these things?
I tried years later when I went back to Star Valley on the ranch. It was all out in the back in a heap of junk. I took a couple of pictures, but it would take a genius to
But
visualize.
during the time you're using it.
No, we didn't.
You know,
Well-
I bet you somebody did, but just in passing or something, and we never kept any records of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know for sure they did. I just
I'm not sure.
can't imagine that we didn't.
Yeah, well, you're real busy.
I asked Doug I tried to describe it to Doug May, because he's got a lot of artistic talent. And I said I'd surely like to have
A sketch of
a sketch of that thing, but I couldn't describe it well enough to get him to didn't quite get it right.
You know, had he been born in another slightly different era and place and had the right opportunity, he could have been a rich man based on his ingenuity.
Yeah. You know, I've learned a couple of things. This same set of CDs that we were listening to, this guy went on to talk about how hockey players in Canada.
It's Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, Gladwell. The really good hockey players in Canada are all born in January, February, or March.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was born.
You know why that is?
Do you know why it is?
No, I don't know.
Well, if you change the cutoff date for being accepted on a team from the 1st of January to the 1st of April, then the best hockey players in Canada would be born in April, May, and June. It's got everything to do with their size and ability at a young age and being nearly a full year older than the poor kid born who was only basically a year younger at the time. They looked at him and said, this kid's too small.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the coordination, so he doesn't get to get on a good team. Anyway, he's got really quite an interesting.
So it boils down to
thing about
opportunity.
it.
Those kids got all the best coaching, all the best opportunities, and turned out to be the best players just because they were born and based on the cutoff, they were the oldest kids in that
The
season.
oldest kids in that year's crop. Anyway, he did something else about. It's more than the innate ability, which is a necessary ingredient, and the work ethic, which is also a necessary ingredient. But there are other factors just as important that he ascribed it to just pure chance, being born at a given time. But my impression after listening to this whole CD was, all these, what was it? Something like 30 of the 75 most wealthy men in the world from the time of records to the current time were born within a 25-year window or something in the 1800s. A third of everyone that ever lived were born within this very narrow window. It's just like our ancestors all came to Utah within about a 15-year window. I mean, that's just the way everything, I think, was planned to work out. And if Brigham Young, who had been on a mission in England, a couple of missions in England, and saw what was happening over there with the railroad, and was already starting to happen in the United States, he'd have got over to winter quarters and said, that's a hell of a long way across the plains. Why don't we just go out here in this rich farmland and start farming for about 10 years until the railroad gets to Utah? It'd sure save us a lot of headaches. But had he done that, there'd have been no place for the Mormons. The mountain states would be filled up with mining people who would have shot and killed every Mormon that got near.
So his theory was get out early, stake your claim, and then when it looked like the railroad was getting close to being completed, then they pumped more money in the perpetual immigration fund to get more in there to colonize those outlying areas and expand the borders as much as they could.
I don't remember when the perpetual immigration fund ended. In one sense, it was a great success. In another sense, it never fully succeeded because the immigrants were so poor.
Oh yeah,
they couldn't
make the payments once they got here.
They could never make the payments. So they just, I think it was John Taylor in 1870, was it? Somewhere, no, it would have been 1880. I think it was John Taylor in 1880 declared a jubilee. Yeah, 50 years after the organization of the church, and they just
forgave
all the debts and said, don't worry about it.
I think the railroad was completed in '69, and the biggest immigration years were '67 through 68 and 69. Just it's really a big push to get as many people here as they
Yeah.
could.
And the same thing happened. It had that whole spirit of immigration occurred earlier, they would have had to have settled in the eastern seaboard states because they couldn't move west. And by that time, land was too expensive there. It had to be a place where land was just opening up when all this Mormon migration took place.
Yeah.
And if they'd waited longer, there would have been nothing.
Interesting.
It would have all been taken. So it's just one of those interesting things.
Hmm.
There's another interesting thing that's puzzled the historians greatly, and that is how this little country of 1 million people could have produced a group of men so learned in the evils and bad practices of governments that they had the minds to establish the Constitution. I mean, you could take every government expert on government in the United States today and put them together, and they couldn't begin to come up with a Constitution.
You're right. They couldn't.
It's-
Yeah, there's no question about it. That's what the Lord tells us, that He raised him up.
And he's done that with essentially everybody. You know, Bill Gates would have never been Bill Gates if he didn't have a rich father.
And having been born like 30 miles from the University
Yeah,
of Washington
right,
or whatever,
right,
so he had
yeah.
opportunity with those
Yeah, yeah.
to mess with the computers when he was
Yeah,
young.
yeah. It took the whole set of requirements.
So yes, there's a lot to that. Those immigrants during that period of time. The Ogdens were some of the last to come. 1869. I think that they might have been the last immigrant train before the railroad was completed.
Yeah.
They rode the railroad to into Wyoming, and then
Okay.